August 28, 1945. A fishing village on the coast of Kanagawa Prefecture. The morning air is thick with humidity and silence. Yoshiko Tanaka, a name she will later share in interviews decades after this moment, stands in the doorway of her family's home. She is 31 years old, a mother of 3. Her youngest, a boy of 4, clings to her leg. She can hear it now. The distant rumble of engines, American engines. For 4 years, she's been told what this sound means. The propaganda films showed it clearly. The neighborhood association leader repeated it at every meeting. The radio broadcasts left no room for doubt. The Americans are not soldiers. They are demons, beasts in human form. They will rape every woman. They will bayonet every child. They will eat the flesh of the Japanese people. This is what she knows. This is what she believes. She pulls her son inside and slides the door shut. The wooden slats cannot block the sound of the convoy. Trucks, jeeps, the clatter of equipment. She has a kitchen knife hidden beneath the floorboards. Not to fight. She knows she cannot fight. The knife is for her children, and then for herself. This is what the government told her to do. This is what a good Japanese mother does. She does not let her family fall into the hands of monsters. Her son looks up at her. He does not understand why she is crying. 2 weeks earlier, August 15th, 1945, noon. Across the Japanese home islands, 100 million people gather around radios, in factories and schools, in military barracks and fishing villages, in the burned-out shells of Tokyo and Osaka. They strain to hear a voice most have never heard before, the voice of Emperor Hirohito himself. The broadcast is scratchy. The language is formal, archaic court Japanese that many struggle to understand. But the meaning becomes clear. Japan has accepted the Potsdam Declaration. The war is over. The reaction is not what the Americans expect. There are no celebrations, no crowds in the streets. Instead, there is terror. Because the Japanese people have been told, repeatedly, systematically, for years, what defeat means. The propaganda began long before Pearl Harbor. It intensified as the war turned against Japan. Government films depicted American soldiers as literal oni, demons from Japanese folklore. Posters showed GIs with fangs and claws. Radio broadcasts described the torture camps where captured Japanese were mutilated for sport. Newspapers printed stories of American troops collecting Japanese skulls as trophies. And in this case, the propaganda contained a kernel of terrible truth. Life magazine had published a photograph in 1944 showing a young American woman with a Japanese skull sent home by her boyfriend. The image confirmed everything the Japanese government claimed. By 1945, the message was absolute. Surrender means annihilation. The Americans will show no mercy. They will violate your wives and daughters. They will murder your sons. They will burn your homes and salt your fields. Death is preferable. Death is honorable. This was not merely propaganda, it was policy. The government distributed pamphlets instructing civilians on how to die properly. Women were told to drown themselves rather than face capture. Families were encouraged to commit collective suicide. Jokusai, the shattering of the jewel. In Saipan and Okinawa, thousands had already done exactly this. Mothers had thrown their children from cliffs before jumping themselves. Fathers had killed their families with grenades provided by the Imperial Army. Now, the emperor has surrendered and the demons are coming. In the weeks between the surrender announcement and the arrival of occupation forces, Japan descends into a strange paralysis. The military, which had promised to fight to the last man, stands down. The government, which had demanded collective death, now asks for cooperation with the occupiers. The contradiction is unbearable. Some choose not to bear it. Military officers commit ritual suicide by the hundreds. Civilians who had steeled themselves for glorious death now face the prospect of shameful life under the rule of monsters. Families make preparations. In cities and villages across Japan, fathers dig hiding places for their daughters. Mothers sew rough clothing to make their girls look unattractive, to look like boys, to look like anything other than what they are. Young women cut their hair short and smear their faces with ash and dirt. Poison is stockpiled. Ropes are prepared. The waiting is almost worse than the bombing. In Tokyo, the burned-out capital, an estimated 70% of the population has fled to the countryside. Those who remain, too old, too sick, too stubborn to run, board up their windows and wait. The streets are empty. The silence is absolute. Meanwhile, 4,000 miles away, American soldiers prepare for an occupation they do not understand. The men of the 11th Airborne Division assemble at Okinawa. They are veterans. They have fought through the Philippines. They have seen what the Japanese military did to prisoners of war. The Bataan Death March, the hell ships, the camps where Allied soldiers starved and died by the thousands. They have fought an enemy that refused to surrender, that launched suicide attacks, that seemed to prefer death to capture. Now they are being told to occupy that enemy's homeland, to walk among his people, to maintain order without provoking resistance. Many expect ambushes, sniper fire, suicide bombers. The military briefings warn of potential last-stand resistance from soldiers who refuse to accept defeat. Some commanders quietly prepare for the worst, a guerrilla war that could drag on for years. What no one on either side expects is what actually happens. August 30th, 1945. 10 a.m. Atsugi Airfield, 25 miles southwest of Tokyo. A C-54 transport aircraft touches down on the damaged runway. The door opens. General Douglas MacArthur steps onto Japanese soil. He is unarmed. He wears no helmet. His corncob pipe juts from his jaw at its characteristic angle. Photographers capture the moment. The supreme commander of Allied powers walking calmly into the heart of a nation that 2 weeks ago was prepared to fight to extinction. It is a calculated performance. And it works. The message is clear. The Americans are not afraid. They do not expect resistance. They are not here to destroy. They are here to occupy, to rebuild, to transform. But for the Japanese civilians watching from a distance, the message is different. The demon general has arrived, and he looks like a man. The first days of occupation pass in a surreal calm. American convoys roll through empty streets. GIs dismount and look around at the devastation. Miles of ash where cities once stood, rubble where homes and factories had been, hollow-eyed survivors picking through the wreckage. The soldiers have been briefed on Japanese atrocities. They have been warned about potential threats. What they have not been prepared for is the silence. The Japanese people do not attack. They do not resist. They do not even look directly at the occupiers. They bow. They step aside. They make themselves small and invisible. Mothers clutch their children and hurry past. Shopkeepers keep their doors closed. The few who are caught outside freeze in place, heads down, waiting for whatever comes next. The Americans wait too. They have been told the Japanese are fanatical, unpredictable, dangerous. Instead, they find ghosts. A population so thoroughly defeated, so completely exhausted, that resistance is simply beyond their capacity. And then, a child steps forward. The first contacts come through the children. This pattern repeats across Japan, documented in occupation records, memoirs, and Japanese accounts alike. Adults are too afraid, too traumatized, too conditioned to interact. But children are curious. They have been told the Americans are demons. But the creatures they see do not look like demons. They look like men. Strange men, enormous men, with pale skin and round eyes and uniforms the color of mud. And the men are smiling. In a village in Kanagawa, perhaps the same village where Yoshiko Tanaka waits in terror, a young boy breaks free from his mother's grasp. He runs toward a group of American soldiers standing beside their jeep. His mother screams. She is certain she's about to watch her son die. The soldiers turn. One of them reaches into his pocket. He pulls out a chocolate bar. The boy stops. He does not understand. He has not seen chocolate in years. The war consumed every luxury, every sweetness, every unnecessary thing. He does not know what to do. The soldier unwraps the bar, breaks off a piece, and holds it out. The boy looks back at his mother. Her face is frozen in horror. The soldier kneels down to the child's level. He's still smiling. He makes a gesture. Eat. The boy takes the chocolate. He puts it in his mouth. His eyes go wide, and the soldier laughs. Not cruelly, not mockingly, just laughs. The way a man laughs when he makes a child happy. The mother does not move. She cannot move, because everything she believed, everything she was prepared to do, is collapsing inside her. The demon gave her son candy. The monster is kind. This scene, or versions of it, plays out thousands of times across occupied Japan. American GIs arrive with pockets full of chocolate bars, chewing gum, and hard candies. Items that are trivial luxuries in America become treasures in a nation where children have known nothing but rationing and deprivation. The soldiers hand them out freely, carelessly, as if sweetness costs nothing. Japanese accounts from the occupation period describe the profound psychological impact of these encounters. Children who had been taught to fear Americans learn, instead, to follow them, to wait outside their camps, to call out "Haro" and "Gibume chokorito," "Give me chocolate." The occupation forces become associated not with terror, but with abundance. But it is the mothers who experience the true transformation. A woman who had hidden a knife to kill her own children watches as a foreign soldier feeds them sweets. A grandmother, who had prepared poison tea for her family, sees GIs share their rations with hungry neighbors. A young wife, who had smeared her face with filth to appear repulsive, finds herself treated with courtesy, respect even. The Americans do not rape. They do not murder. They do not eat human flesh. They give instructions. They establish order. They hand out food to the starving and medicine to the sick. The tears come later, in quiet moments, when the women finally allow themselves to feel what they have survived. Not the war, but the fear. The certain knowledge that their children would die in agony, and the crushing relief of discovering that knowledge was a lie. One occupation-era diary, preserved in Japanese archives, contains an entry from a mother in Yokohama. She writes of watching American soldiers playing with Japanese children in the street. "I wept for an hour," she records, "not because I was sad, because I had been ready to kill my own daughters, and now they are laughing." The transformation is not instant. Trust builds slowly through thousands of small interactions. A soldier who helps an old man carry water, a medic who treats a child's infected wound, a supply sergeant who looks the other way when hungry civilians scavenge from garbage bins. Each act chips away at the propaganda, at the fear, at the years of conditioning that taught the Japanese people to expect the worst. There are, of course, darker chapters. The occupation is not without violence. Crimes occur, assaults, thefts, the exploitation of desperate women. These incidents are real, and they leave their own scars. But they do not define the occupation as a whole. They do not match the apocalyptic horror that the Japanese government promised. The gap between expectation and reality is so vast that it reshapes the national psyche. By late 1945, the streets are no longer empty. Japanese civilians move openly among the occupiers. Markets reopen. Children attend schools where new textbooks, stripped of militarist propaganda, teach different lessons. The word democracy enters common vocabulary. American jazz plays on radio stations that once broadcast war news. The world has not ended. It has changed. General MacArthur understands the power of what is happening. His administration actively encourages the distribution of food aid, the visible presence of humanitarian assistance, the contrast between occupation reality and wartime propaganda. This is not pure altruism. It is strategy. A cooperative population is easier to govern than a rebellious one. But the strategy works because it aligns with something deeper. The ordinary American soldier does not think in strategic terms. He sees hungry kids and shares his lunch. He sees frightened mothers and tries not to frighten them further. He is not a demon. He is a person. And personhood, it turns out, is contagious. The Japanese people begin to see themselves differently too. The government that told them to die rather than surrender, that government lied. the propaganda that painted Americans as monsters, that propaganda lied. If those authorities lied about this, what else did they lie about? The question opens a door that cannot be closed. The reckoning with wartime leadership, with military fanaticism, with the ideology that led Japan to catastrophe. That reckoning begins in the streets, with chocolate bars and chewing gum, with the simple discovery that the enemy is human. The image becomes iconic. The photograph that spreads across the world, Japanese children surrounding American soldiers, hands outstretched, faces bright with smiles that were unthinkable weeks before. The candy distribution programs become official policy. Care packages flood into Japan. The narrative shifts from occupation to reconstruction, from punishment to partnership. By 1947, opinion surveys conducted by occupation authorities show a remarkable finding. The majority of Japanese civilians express positive views of the occupation, not grudging acceptance, not fearful compliance, actual approval. The same population that had been prepared for mass suicide now speaks of American soldiers with something approaching gratitude. This is not universal. Resentments persist. The humiliation of defeat leaves scars that take generations to heal. The occupation imposes changes that many Japanese view as cultural imperialism. The relationship is complex, contradictory, and far from equal. But the expected bloodbath never comes. The genocide that propaganda promised never materializes. And the children who were supposed to be killed by monsters grow up remembering kindness. Decades later, historians will debate the lessons of the Japanese occupation. Some will point to it as a model for post-conflict reconstruction. Others will note the unique circumstances, the emperor's authority, the total nature of defeat, the homogeneity of Japanese society that made success possible. The debate continues. But there is one lesson that requires no debate. The most powerful weapon against propaganda is experience. The most effective counter to fear is contact. The Japanese government spent years constructing an image of the American enemy as subhuman, as demonic, as existentially threatening. That construction collapsed in days, not through counter-propaganda, not through argument, not through force of arms, but through chocolate bars and chewing gum, through soldiers who smiled at children, through small acts of decency that contradicted everything the population had been told to believe. The mothers who had hidden knives put them away. The fathers who had dug hiding places for their daughters filled them in. The families who had stockpiled poison poured it out. Not because they were ordered to, but because the enemy they feared did not exist. What they found instead were young men, tired, far from home, uncertain of their welcome, who reached into their pockets and offered sweetness to a broken world. In interviews conducted in the 1980s and 90s, elderly Japanese women recall those first days of occupation with vivid clarity. They remember the sound of the convoys, the terror of waiting, the moment when a foreign soldier knelt down to their child's level and offered something precious, something impossible, something that tasted like the future might not be as dark as they feared. One woman, her name recorded only as KS in the oral history archives, describes the moment she realized her family would survive. An American private, no more than 19 or 20 years old, stopped outside her house. He saw her children peering through the window. He waved. Then he reached into his pack and pulled out a handful of hard candies. She opened the door. She was trembling. She had been taught that this man was her enemy, that he wanted to destroy everything she loved. He pressed the candies into her hand. He said something in English she did not understand. Then he smiled and walked away. I cried for a week, she told the interviewer 50 years later. I'd been ready to kill my children to save them from him. And he gave them candy. He gave them candy. She pauses in the recording. Her voice breaks. How do you live with that? How do you live with knowing you almost murdered your own children because of a lie? That question, how do you live with believing a lie, haunts Japan's post-war generation. The answer, for many, involves a complete reimagining of their nation's past, their government's credibility, their own capacity for manipulation. The candy bars and chocolate become symbols of something larger. The possibility that enemies can become partners, that fear can become trust, that the worst expectations do not have to come true. It is a fragile lesson. History shows how easily it can be forgotten, how new propaganda can paint new enemies, how fear can override experience, how the next generation can be taught to hate people they have never met. But for one moment, in the ruins of a defeated nation in the summer of 1945, something remarkable happened. Demons turned out to be men, monsters turned out to be kind, and mothers who had prepared to kill their children watched those children laugh as they tasted chocolate for the first time in years. The war ended not with the signing of documents on the deck of the USS Missouri. It ended in 10,000 small moments of unexpected humanity. It ended with children running toward soldiers instead of away from them. It ended with fear dissolving into bewilderment, and bewilderment softening into something like hope. That is what the Japanese civilians said when American soldiers gave them candy. They said nothing at first. They were too shocked to speak. And then they wept.